Okay, Algebra 1 fans, our topic for today, this is notes 2-7. It's called solving literal equations. You may see this written as solving formulas, because often that's what we will be doing, is solving formulas, solving variables. So our goal after this lesson, students should be able to solve formulas for a given variable. Before we begin, let me give you your joke of the day. We don't have any vegetable jokes yet. So if you do, let us know. Let us. Okay. So recall solving equations here. One of the things when I get confused by word problems or lots of variables, I like to go back to examples with numbers, okay, or maybe just one variable. So if we solve this, 2x plus 3 is equal to 9, the first thing we do is we move the constant, which is the number that is not multiplying the x, so in this case, plus 3, and we move the constant by doing the inverse, which is subtraction, so minus minus, and we get 2x equals 6. And then our last move is to divide by 2, because we're undoing multiplication. Now that 2, okay, so this is your constant. This is what we call the coefficient. That's the number that multiplies the variable. And if it's multiplying it, to undo that, we divide, and we get x is equal to 3. If we have 7 times h is equal to 28, that's the coefficient 7. We divide by 7, and we get h is equal to 4. So what happens if we take a formula and we want to solve, this is b times h is equal to a for h. Now, you may have seen this formula for a rectangle. This is the formula for the area. B is the base, h is the height. Now that doesn't really matter. We don't need to know that. What we do need to know is that we are trying to get h by itself if we solve for h, which means we have to move the b to the other side. Well, if you look at this and you look at number 2, isn't it kind of the same setup? We have a value times a variable is equal to another value. We have a value, b, times the variable we want is equal to another value, a. So, the way I'm thinking about this, that's b times h. How do I undo multiplication? I divide. b divided by b is 1, so what we get is h equals, and that's just a over b. That's a divided by b. I can't do anything else with that. That's it. Okay, so nothing is going to change. The rules are the same. Usually we move the constant first by adding or subtracting, and then we move the coefficient by multiplying or dividing. Doesn't matter if there are other letters, because remember, a variable is just some value. It represents an unknown number. So I could just as easily have said 5h equals 30. Here's my b, here's my a. How do I solve? Oh, I divide by 5. Okay? So this is called, when you solve a formula or what they call a literal equation, it's an equation with at least 2 variables. It's an equation with at least 2 variables. Okay, so when we solve any kind of equations, remember the goal is to isolate the variable. Now that's the variable we're solving for. So going back to this problem, we solved for h. That means we want h equals. Okay? We move the constants by adding or subtracting. And we move the coefficients by multiplying or dividing. And the thing to remember is the rules don't change. It's the same process. It just looks different. Okay, so let's do a few examples here. Number 4 says F equals m times a. This is force equals mass times acceleration. We're going to solve for m. So that means that we want this variable to be by itself. I'm not going to move m, I'm going to move everything that's on that side of m. So we want to move a to the other side. Well, right now these are multiplying. So how do we undo multiplication? We divide both sides by this value. A divided by a is 1. So we get f divided by a equals m. And now it's solved for m. That's it. M equals force divided by acceleration. Number 5 is the volume of a rectangular prism. Volume equals length times width times height. Solve for W. So that means that we need to move the L and the H. Now the cool thing is, in this case, L and H are multiplying W. They're all multiplying each other. How do I undo multiplication? I divide. That's my L, and there's H. So I can divide by both at the same time. Divide by L times H, because here's what happens. L divided by L is 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. H divided by H is 1. So we get W equals, and this is V divided by LH. So volume divided by, and that would be the length times the height. The LH multiply each other, but overall it's a fraction. That's it. Okay, so again, this looks confusing, but if you understand the rules about when you add and subtract, and when you multiply or divide to solve equations, okay, this isn't that bad. So let's flip it over. Let's do a couple examples. Let's do a few more here. And what I would recommend is that you try to do these yourself and then unpause the video and see if you agree with what I have. So for number 6, V equals, now that's 1/2 times L times P. It says solve for P. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to move the 1/2 and the L. Now in this case we have a fraction, okay? So this is 1/2. I am going to get rid of the denominator first. There's more than one way to do this, but what I'm going to do first, well actually I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to say it's V equals, that's the same thing as 1 times L times P. I'm going to write this as one fraction. The LP is part of the numerator, and the 2 is the denominator. So that's L times P divided by 2. First thing I'm going to do is undo division. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. And what we get is 2V, 2 times V equals, here the 2's divide out to 1. That's L times P. Now, as you go through, you have to remind yourself, what are we solving for? Oh, we want P by itself. So this is L times P. To undo that, we will divide by L. And 2V divided by L equals P. That's it. Now it's solved for P. When you get it to P equals or L equals or W equals, you're done. Number 7 is the perimeter formula for a rectangle. Okay, you may be familiar with that. Here's your length, here's your width, and there's 2 lengths and 2 widths, and the perimeters, you add up all the sides. Now we want to solve this formula for L. Okay, now in this case, we do actually have a plus or a minus here. We have a plus. 2L plus 2W. I'm going to move this whole thing. This is like a constant. Remember, that is some number. That's just a value. And to move that value, I am going to subtract 2W. Now, we're not allowed to combine these. They're not like terms. So I'm just going to write P minus 2W equals 2 times the length. How do we undo multiplication? Well, we're going to divide by 2. And in this case, so we're going to get L equals, this is actually a good way to write it. You can leave it as P minus 2W divided by 2. That's what I'm going to do. That's the easiest way to do it. If you want to break that apart, when you have more than one term in the numerator of a fraction, I can divide each piece by 2. So I could say this is P divided by 2. minus 2w divided by 2. Then I could divide this, I could reduce that. I could say p over 2 minus w equals L. But you'll see that I'm doing a lot more work. I could even write this as 1/2 p minus w equals L. Right? So that's like 1p divided by 2. That fraction's 1/2 times p. So there's different ways to write this. I will kind of keep the easy way, which I think is this. All right, number 8's a little bit, trickier here. 9 times a times b minus c divided by 10, all divided by 10, equals -4. Solve for a. So we want to get the a by itself. We got to move all of this to the other side. Let's start by undoing division. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. So we get 9ab minus c equals, that's -40. I can actually multiply that. Now, we're solving for a. Let's move the constant first. The constant is the number that is separated from the variable. So minus c, we're going to move that. So to undo subtraction, we will add. And so we get 9ab, -c plus c is 0. Now this is just -40 plus c. I'm actually going to write the c in front. I'll write it as c minus 40. Now we're solving for a. 9 and b are both multiplying the a. So to undo multiplication, let's divide. So I'm going to divide by 9b. I can do this at the same time. The 9's divide to 1. b divided by b is 1. And what we get is 1a equals c minus 40 divided by 9b. And that's as far as we can go. We can't combine or reduce, so you're done. So I think one of the things that people find kind of confusing is that your answer doesn't look very simple. Normally an answer will look a little bit easier or shorter. No, we're not really doing that. We're just moving things around so that we can get it as a equals, in this case, to solve for a. Number 9, this is another volume problem. This is actually for a sphere, which is a ball. Something like that. Volume equals 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. We're going to solve it for r. All right, so first thing we'll do here, I'm going to undo the division part because it's all of this divided by 3. So let's multiply both sides by 3. And that gives us 3v equals, now here the 3's reduce. I can do the division first, that's 1. We get 4 times pi times the radius raised to the 3rd power. Now we're solving for r. So I want to move the 4 pi to the other side. That's 4 times pi times r to the 3rd. So let's go ahead and divide by 4 pi. Okay, so we get 3v over 4 pi equals, this is 1 r to the 3rd. Now, the last move here, this is a new technique. To undo an exponent, we have to take the root of that exponent. If it was x squared equals 25, to undo a square, we would take the square root of both sides. Since this is raised to the 3rd power, we are going to take what is called the 3rd root, or the cube root of both sides. Now, over on the left side, we just get the cube root of 3v divided by 4 pi equals, and this is just r. And we have now solved for r. Now that is the end of part 1, so go ahead and stop this and do part 2 for the last 2 examples.